Hey everyone! Before we get started today, here is a quick message from this video's sponsor. I have to say, what is really cool about my audience starting to grow a little bit is that I now have aspiring and even junior game designers watching my content, and that is really flattering to me, actually. But from what I hear, getting into game design can be pretty tricky, what with dealing with different engines, coding, keeping everything organized. There's a lot of pitfalls there. But that's why the folks at Machinations are here to help. Machinations takes all the text docs, diagrams, whiteboards, and it simplifies everything into an easy-to-use digital space where you can balance your game and work with friends. And even better, if you want to get into design and you don't know how to code yet, Machinations is a reliable way to rapidly prototype without any coding necessary. So, if you want to make your first steps into game design that little bit easier, why not head to the description below, click our personalized link, give Machinations a try, and you can thank me later. For now though, let's get on to today's video. Sifu, 2022's Is It a Roguelike, Is It Not a Roguelike debate game. When it came out back in Feb Games Brewery, it's safe to say it wasn't exactly what everyone was expecting. Here was a game that had attracted a pretty mainstream crowd thanks to Sony's trailer in the original PS5 showcase, but after its review embargo lifted, a lot of people were turned off because they didn't realize how difficult it was going to be. Divisive as it may have been, Sifu still earned high praise for its experimental structure and its presentation of stellar kung fu action. I was enjoying Sifu for what it was. It was a challenging action game where you had to become an efficient martial artist, and that's not common. In my experience, it was all about minimizing the damage you took versus the damage you gave out, which usually comes in the form of multiple face slaps to an enemy when they're definitely already knocked out. But I must admit, the amount of challenge this game presented me with was starting to get to me. Now don't get me wrong, I love a difficult game, but the mental energy it was taking me to boot up Sifu and have a genuine go at fighting one of the bosses was beginning to turn me off. I was playing less and less, and what's more, in the game I wasn't getting a lot of depth out of the fighting mechanics. I was more concerned with the efficiency I mentioned before than I was about unlocking and learning a bunch of new extra moves that so often get taken away from you. The same combo that's available to you from the start works on pretty much every enemy so long as you parry and learn specific attack patterns. You might think I'm crazy for this, but you don't really need any of the upgrade moves in Sifu. Moreover, keeping your age down is one of the main goals of this game, and sometimes that calls for picking your battles, not farming XP to unlock new moves that you don't actually need. But then in May, patch 1.009 arrived, and it was announced that Sifu would now have 3 optional difficulty settings. I was very intrigued. Difficulty was, after all, one of the central pillars of this game's design and structure, so how is making the game fundamentally easier going to change things? Well, here's what I found.
I do not want to fight you. That feeling of vengeance, it will not cease here.
First thing I realized in an easier difficulty was that from a player experience angle, Sifu is now a much deeper game than before. For me, subjectively speaking, I liked it better. And that's not to say that the higher difficulty was badly designed, or if you enjoyed the higher challenge, you were wrong. That's just my take. So if you're scrolling down to the comments right now to tell me that you're a Souls fan and you disagree, I swear to God! See, I loved Absolver, and before that, I loved God of War, and before that, I loved Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi 3, and before that, I loved The Matrix Path of Neo. What does this bizarre selection of games have in common? Well, they all have deep movesets that were extremely fun to learn and play around with. Each move had a specific button combination that had to be hit in sequence or with just unattainable hand positions. They were all games where the combat was reliant on you finding your own fighting style, learning the moves that you like the most, and games where you'd be rewarded for studying the movesets. Today, games like that don't really turn up very often. But Sifu, the successor to Absolver, definitely seemed to be the next game in line. So when I found out I'd be getting an easy mode where I could experiment with the moveset more, I was very in. I was suddenly in no rush at all to get through the levels. I was there to show off my amazing kung fu moves to the packs of goons I was fighting. I wanted them to see my flashy spinning back kick that I unlocked from my experience in the previous level, and surprise them with a jab from down low. I started using weapons more and caring about their proficiency. I started using the environment and each level's props to my advantage. I was finally experiencing Sifu the way I experienced its very first level. I was exploring, I was deep diving into what a kung fu brawler in 2022 had to offer me. Moreover, I was actually stopping to smell plot roses as well. What was kind of a nonsensical revenge tale was starting to become an interesting mystery I could piece together using each level's clues. So, I think Sifu shows us that for some players, hopefully it's not just me, a game with less challenge can create more fertile ground for thorough exploration and narrative reception.
You're here, in front of me, only because of this pendant. But what if I take it from you? Will you fear death once again? You sound like the frightened one to me.
On that note, when I played Sifu on an easier difficulty, I was now there to have fun. I didn't have to worry about relentlessly hacking away at a level, or if I was in a good enough mood to let a boss kick my ass while I learned their attack patterns. Suddenly, the opposite was true. I had a spare 10 minutes while my dinner was cooking. Might as well jump in and see how fast I could get through a level. It's another way this game was totally changed by its new difficulty. It was a different game in my mind because it didn't require masses of mental energy to enjoy. Where there was anxiety, now there was only excitement. And once again, that's not to say the higher difficulty is worse, just that for me, individually, it was more enjoyable. I feel like I'm having to constantly reassure you of that here, because when you say to people that difficulty changes games, I feel like the conclusion a lot of them will come to is that the game will be inherently worse if it gets easier, but I don't think that's true. Without getting bogged down in a done-to-death debate, accessibility is important, but I think a point that's overlooked is the fact that sometimes it isn't about a game being too difficult for someone to complete. Sometimes it's more about how much mental energy they have to do so. There is a line at which enjoyment of a piece of entertainment in somebody's free time transforms into a daunting task they're only putting themselves through because they've already paid money for it. On an easier difficulty, the challenge and reward ratio of this game was much better suited to me individually based on the amount of energy I had to play at the end of a long day. On a higher difficulty, there wasn't so much a minute-to-minute rewarding feeling for me, more so a feeling of relief. For example, if I got through a room without taking damage, that was a weight off my shoulders, because it might have taken 2 or 3 years off my life in a previous attempt. 2 or 3 years that would be much better spent fighting the boss. On the easier student setting, I had a new feeling of accomplishment and enjoyment from every slick combo I managed to string together. In complete contrast to my experience before the update, it was now so totally rewarding for me to drop into this game, humble a boss, and walk out again. In many ways, the structure of this game actually fit that style of play session even more than it did the longer sessions I'd put myself through just to memorize a boss's attack pattern. Okay, I said I wasn't gonna do it, and I swear I wasn't. But it's time to pick a side and get bogged down in the done-to-death debate. The reason I think Sifu adding easier difficulty options is so significant and something the industry can definitely learn from is because this was a hard game. And it was a hard game that people really enjoyed. And when you have a game like that, there is always a group of people who are so set against that game getting easier. It's like they think of difficulty as some secret sauce that has to be in there or the game will be ruined. A lot of the time, people who hold that view, at least in my experience, only really hold it for 2 reasons. One, they suffered through a more difficult mode already, and they want other people to suffer in the exact same way they did, otherwise any validation they gain from doing so will be cheapened. Or, they hold the belief that the game's messaging won't carry through in the same way if the challenge is no longer present. But I feel like both of those points need some new perspective. Firstly, the vocabulary we use in gaming isn't exactly conducive to a healthy debate on this issue. We use the terms easy and hard most of the time, and that isn't exactly appropriate for everyone. An easy option for someone who plays hard games all the time may not be an easy mode for somebody else. It may even be a hard mode, or one that simply allows them to play a game at all. For people who are new to games, for people who have a disability, or hell, let's just open up the floor, for people who can't always wrap their head around a game's systems. It isn't about lowering a game's difficulty from high to low, but lowering it from impossible and unplayable to possible and enjoyable. The level of challenge that is present in video games is fantastic and totally unique. I mean, what other form of entertainment do you get skill checked in? If you read a chapter of a book too slowly, it doesn't slam shut in your face, and it shouldn't. People need to be able to play games, no matter their structure or genre or how challenging they were for you. If you're worried about challenging games not nailing their messaging in lower difficulties, think about this. Sifu is a game about kung fu, power, and using your knowledge of both of those things to either destroy or spare your lifelong enemies. On an easier difficulty, I'd say I actually had more of an opportunity to grapple with those themes because I had the power to destroy any enemy that I wanted, and it took more for me to break my habit of finishing them with a button combo the game had conditioned me to use by hitting the spare button instead. So, does adding difficulty options to a challenging game change it on a fundamental player experience level? Yeah, absolutely, of course it does. And it's totally subjective whether an easier or harder difficulty is better. But is high difficulty a secret sauce that a game will be ruined by if it doesn't have? Or will an absence of that secret ingredient make it less effective in putting forward themes and narratives? Absolutely not. As Sifu shows, you can get to the same thematic outcome while catering to players with different abilities or mental energies. In short, there is no secret ingredient. Thank you so much for watching! If you made it this far, please be sure to head to the comments and tell me what you thought. We're slowly closing in on that 1,000 subscriber mark, so if you aren't subbed already, hit the button and the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload, and if you know anyone who might enjoy this video, please pass it on to them. Thanks again so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed. All the best, and tune in next time.